Welcome to another Chronosurveys video. Today we'll be talking about Welwitschia mirabilis, a fantastic plant, a living fossil, which has a very interesting biology, but also the history of its discovery to science, and also its palynology, as we will see. So this plant lives in the Namib Desert, which is located in the coastal area in southern Angola and northern Namibia. There are several patches where, or areas where it can be found in northern Namibia and southern Angola. The ones I'll be talking about are from this area, the Etandeka and neighboring areas in northern Namibia. So it lives here always in rocky deserts and not so far away from the coast, basically dependent on the occasional showers and the humidity it gets from the sea. So in terms of classification, it's considered to be a gymnosperm, and we'll see why. And then a class which it shares with only 2 or 3 other genera, which is the Gnetopsida. And then the order, family and genus are all unique to Welwitschia. It was not described as such originally, so the first to describe it was the Austrian botanist Friedrich Welwitsch, when he was working in southern Angola, and he described it initially as Tomboa bainesi, so taking the name of the local tribes in southern Angola, which called it the plant tumbo. It was later that Joseph Hooker, another botanist working in the UK, based on the collection by Welwitsch, that redescribed it as Welwitschia mirabilis, to honor the first one who actually collected the specimens and described it. So Welwitsch was working for the Portuguese government. He was initially in Portugal with a grant to describe flora and also fauna from Portugal, specifically from the islands of Açores and Madeira. He never actually went there. Most of his work, or all of his work in Portugal, was from mainland Portugal. And then eventually he was hired by the Portuguese government in the second half of the 19th century to go to Angola and describe the flora and fauna there. There are 2 main publications where he describes his findings, one from publication in the UK and another from publication here in Portugal. So overall he collected over 8,000 samples, which corresponded to over 5,000 species. About 1,000 of them were new to science. He did not describe all of them, so some of the species were actually described from the specimens that he collected, but by other botanists. There's also an interesting story about his legacy, so his collection of publication notes and also the specimens, which were eventually split between Portugal and the UK after a legal dispute. So today you can find part of his collections in the Natural History Museum here in Lisbon. This is one of the stems of Welwitschia mirabilis, now in display here in Lisbon. And the rest of the collection you can find it in the Natural History Museum in London. So this is how the plant looks like. It's rather simple, although quite, let's say, puzzling. So there's a stem base. Part of it is buried, so it grows underground and then has roots. So we only see the upper part of the stem. And then 2 permanent leaves, which grow continuously. So as they grow, they start to split, but actually they correspond to only two leaves. And you can see that in more junior specimens, where you actually see a very small stem in the center, and then only 2 leaves, which eventually start to widen, and as they do that, they start to split. So they grow continuously. There are not that many predators. Rhinos are known to chew up the ends of it, and that's why some of them look like this and they start to dry up. But essentially they are very simple morphology. They're usually more or less this size, up to 50 centimeters high, so not that tall. They can be up to several meters wide, although most of the specimens I've seen are about 1 meter wide or something. Specimens like this are estimated to be around 500 to 600 years old, but some bigger and older specimens were dated with carbon dating, and they can be up to 2,000 years old. And this is how they look in the landscape, so rocky deserts, so they're distributed around far away from each other, and they don't seem to be, well, in great issues in terms of preservation. So this is very desolate area in Namibia, so they seem to be continue thriving as much as they can, as they have been for maybe millions of years. So they are gymnosperms in the sense that they produce cones. Separate specimens are either female or male, and the cones they produce are naturally different. So the male cones will produce the pollen grains which will fertilize the female cones. In this case, these are dried up probably from the past year or more than 1 year. And then the female cones, these ones are, the seeds were already formed, and probably in a couple of weeks after I visited this place, they were going to start shedding the seeds. So as a palynologist, of course, I had to take a sample and found fresher examples of the male cones to check out how the pollen looks like. So this short video shows some of these cones that were broken apart, and these are the sporangia. And in some of them they are too obscure and not matured completely. In this case it's partially broken, so you can actually see the pollen grains coming out, some of them still within the sporangium, but some of them are already coming out. So here they are, there's a group of them here, and some of them already leaving. There's another one there, as you can see. And then you can find them, there are many of them which were released already. And in this preparation you can see how they look. There's a pollen mass, so probably came out of one of these sporangium. And in detail, this is how they look. They don't seem to form tetras or dyads or anything. They only seem to be, producing these masses, and then sometimes you see them 2 or 3 together, but not, at least not apparently in any specific organization. So this is how they look: elongate or ellipsoid, with some striations, and then a single slit that runs across longitudinally across the whole pollen grain. So very interesting palynology. And of course, as a geologist, I wanted also to compare this, how this compares to stuff we find in the geological records. So, and indeed, there's species of Welwitschia, or something very similar to Welwitschia, which are now down to the Cretaceous, but we can go further down in time and we can find this Netheasia pollenites, which is known pollen from the lower Permian, which shares many characteristics, probably not exactly from Welwitschia, but from something closely related to that. Same elongate or ellipsoid form with striations or plications and some gradulate ornamentation, and where visible you can also see a slit running through the whole pollen grain. So very similar to the pollen grains of Welwitschia mirabilis. So there you go, in a nutshell, Welwitschia mirabilis from Namibia and the corresponding pollen grains. Thank you for listening.